Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. It was a Thursday evening when I decided to drop the bomb on my family. My name's John, I'm 64 years old, and after 40 years of working as an accountant, I was finally calling it quits. I'd earned the right to spend my days how I pleased. Maybe a bit of fishing, maybe some travel, maybe just sitting on the porch with a beer in hand, reflecting on a life well lived. I'd been putting this off for months, knowing how they'd react. My son, Matt, especially. Always serious, always looking at the bottom line. He never seemed happy with anything I did unless it benefited him somehow. But I couldn't wait any longer. I had to tell them. "Hey Matt, Rachel, come into the living room for a second," I called out to my son and his wife as I sat on the couch. It felt a little strange saying those words, but I couldn't avoid it. They walked in, looking a little too casual, as if they hadn't been talking about me in the kitchen. Rachel, with her perfectly manicured nails and platinum blonde hair, gave me a warm, somewhat forced smile. Matt, with his buzzed hair and business casual shirt, sat beside her, his eyes scanning the room like he was already mentally out the door. "Yeah, Dad. What's up?" Matt asked, his voice low, like he was already in work mode. I cleared my throat, trying to find the right words. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm retiring next month. I'm done with the grind. 40 years is enough. It's time for me to relax a little." I could see the shift in Matt's expression. The easy smile faded, replaced by the tight line of his jaw. Rachel's eyebrows raised, but she stayed silent. She wasn't about to challenge anything. Matt, on the other hand, didn't even try to mask his irritation. "You're retiring?" Matt asked, his tone sharper than I expected. "What the hell, Dad? You can't just stop working like that. You can't afford it. Have you thought this through?" I blinked, taken aback. The anger in his voice cut through me like a knife. "I've been working for 4 decades, Matt. I think I've earned the right to retire." Rachel, ever the diplomat, tried to smooth things over. "I'm sure Matt didn't mean it like that, right, honey?" But Matt wasn't backing down. "No, I do mean it like that. You didn't exactly save up for this, did you? You think I can just pick up the slack? What if something happens, Dad? You're putting all of us in a bad spot." I felt my blood pressure rise, my hands gripping the armrests of the couch. He was acting like I was about to drag them into financial ruin just because I was stepping away. "I'll be fine, Matt. I've got savings. I've planned for this." Matt shook his head, frustrated. "You've planned? Are you seriously expecting me to just cover your living expenses now? I've got my own family to worry about. I can't be your safety net just because you want to go fishing. You should find something else to do, even part-time, just so you're not a burden." Rachel's eyes flicked nervously between us, but she didn't say a word. She wasn't about to step into this minefield. I forced a smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "All right, Matt, if that's what you want. I'll find something. I can always take up part-time work." Matt gave me a tight-lipped smile, satisfied with my forced compliance. "Good. You'll figure it out then." But what really stung wasn't his words. It was the look on Rachel's face. She wasn't concerned. She wasn't happy. She was just indifferent. And that was the hardest part. This wasn't a celebration. It wasn't a joyous occasion. It was a problem to them, a financial burden. As they left the room, Matt already talking about their weekend plans, I sat there, feeling hollow. My retirement, my plans, my entire life had just been reduced to a line on a spreadsheet for them to worry about. I'd hoped for a moment of peace, of recognition, but instead I felt like a weight they wanted to shove aside. I forced myself up and walked to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat back down. My phone buzzed on the counter, but I ignored it. What was the point of even trying to explain anymore? They didn't see me as a man who had worked hard for years, a man who deserved a break. They saw me as an expense. That's when it hit me. My retirement plans? They were crushed, not by my age, not by my health, but by my own flesh and blood. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my plate, still half full of the food Rachel had made. I wasn't hungry anymore. My appetite had vanished the moment I saw the disappointment in Matt's eyes, the coldness in his voice. The house felt empty. Just me and the sound of the clock ticking away, as if time itself was mocking me. I had hoped for a different reaction from my family, support, understanding, even joy for me. But instead, it felt like I was a burden, a mistake. I hadn't been sitting long when I heard voices from the next room. I didn't want to listen, but I couldn't help it. The walls were thin, and their conversation floated to me like a bad smell. Matt's voice was louder than Rachel's, his frustration palpable. "I'm telling you, Rachel, we can't have him just sitting around here all day. He's going to drain us. And then what? He expects us to keep paying for his lifestyle?" Rachel's voice was softer, but still dismissive. "Well, he's your father. You can't just leave him to fend for himself. He should find a part-time job or something, at least until he figures it out." Matt snorted. "You think he's going to figure it out? He thinks he can just retire and everything will be fine. I've got enough on my plate already. I'm not his damn safety net." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. It was like being punched in the stomach, hearing them talk about me as if I weren't even in the room. I had worked my whole life, provided for them, supported them, and this is how they saw me. A burden, a problem to be solved. "I'm serious, Rachel. If he doesn't find something to do, we'll have to kick him out. I'm not going to be stuck paying for everything. We need to set some boundaries. I can't even talk to him without feeling like I'm being guilt-tripped into taking care of him." I could feel the blood rush to my head. Kick me out? This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a liability, as a nuisance they'd rather get rid of. Rachel's response was cold, almost calculating. "Well, if he doesn't get a job soon, we'll have to think about other options. Maybe a nursing home or something. We can't afford to keep enabling him like this." A nursing home. The words hit me like a slap across the face. I closed my eyes, fighting back the sting of tears. I wasn't some old man they could just warehouse because they didn't want to deal with me. I had given my all to this family, and now, in my time of need, all I got was cold indifference. I sat there in silence, too stunned to move, letting their words sink in. They were talking about me like I wasn't even human, like I was some kind of inconvenience, a mistake. I didn't want to hear anymore. I didn't want to listen to their plans, their casual dismissal of my years of sacrifice. But I couldn't bring myself to get up. I didn't have the strength. The house felt colder now, like it had been stripped of any warmth. The love I thought I had earned seemed as distant as the moon. And in that moment, something inside me broke. A part of me I hadn't realized was still hanging on to the idea of being needed, of being loved. I had worked for them, fought for them, but I was nothing more than a paycheck to them, a financial asset. Matt and Rachel had made their decision. I wasn't family, not anymore. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking. I couldn't sit there any longer. I needed air. I needed to be away from them. I needed to escape the suffocating reality they had created for me. I walked to the door, my steps slow and deliberate. As I opened it, I could hear them still talking behind me, their voices muffled now, but the words still clear in my mind. I stepped outside into the cool night air, breathing deeply, trying to calm the storm inside me. I wasn't going to let them treat me like this, not anymore. But I couldn't act in anger. I couldn't let them see how much their words had hurt me. I needed to think. I needed a plan. And I would have one. They would see. They would all see just how wrong they were about me. I couldn't sit still, not after everything I'd overheard. The weight of Matt's words, Rachel's cold indifference, and their plans for me, plans that didn't include me as a part of their family, pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I excused myself from the dinner table, unable to bear another moment of their casual, dismissive chatter. I needed space. I needed to think. The house was still. The hum of the refrigerator and the distant clink of Matt's coffee mug the only sounds. The TV was on, playing some nonsense sitcom that I couldn't bring myself to care about. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a decision to withdraw further from them. When I reached my room, I closed the door softly behind me and sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my mind reeling. For all the work I'd done, for all the sacrifices I'd made, this was how they saw me now. A burden, a problem, someone to be managed. I thought about the years I spent making sure Matt had everything he needed, making sure he never went without, the expensive college tuition I'd paid when I was just scraping by, the wedding I'd funded without a second thought because I wanted him to have the perfect day, and the countless smaller things, helping with car payments, loans for his house, even just showing up to support him time and time again. But now, it seemed like none of that mattered. All the sacrifices, all the care, were nothing more than dollar signs in their eyes. I had given them everything, but what did they give me in return? Coldness, disrespect, and a future where I didn't fit in. I stood and walked over to the window, pulling back the curtains. Outside, the world looked normal, but inside, everything had changed. My family was no longer a place of refuge. It was a place of judgment, and in that moment, I knew something had to shift. I couldn't continue to let them treat me like this. I couldn't be the man who always said yes, always gave, and always got nothing but more demands in return. The plan was forming in my mind, slowly but surely. I didn't need to rage against them. I didn't need to storm out or make some grand gesture of leaving. I just needed to play my cards right. I had the time. I had the patience. And more importantly, I had the power to turn this around. I wasn't a man without options. I picked up my phone from the nightstand and scrolled through the contacts. I dialed the number for a small temp agency I knew would help place someone like me. The call went through, and I spoke briefly with the agent on the other end, giving her my details and agreeing to show up tomorrow. It would be the perfect fit, a janitor position at Matt's company. It was the kind of job they would see as desperate, the kind that would embarrass them, especially Matt. But that's exactly why it would work. The anger that had been boiling inside me started to settle. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't weak. I was strategic, calculating. I was going to turn the tables, let them think I was a joke, let them believe they'd won. The moment would come when they would realize the truth. But for now, I'd wait. I would play along. I would let them believe that they had me exactly where they wanted me. They wouldn't know what hit them when the time was right. The pieces were falling into place, slowly, quietly. And when the moment came, they would see. The father they underestimated was not the man they thought he was. I laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the past few hours was still heavy, but now there was something else, determination. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I sat across from Matt at the breakfast table. Rachel had already left for work, leaving the two of us in a rare moment of silence. I could feel the weight of yesterday's conversation hanging in the air, but I wasn't about to let Matt see how much it had gotten to me. I had a plan now. I was going to take control. "Matt," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I've been thinking about what you said last night, and you're right. I can't just sit around doing nothing. I'm going to get a job." Matt looked up from his coffee, the surprised expression on his face quickly replaced by a look of smug satisfaction. "Well, I'm glad to hear that. You don't want to be a burden to us, right?" I could see the way his mind worked. He thought he had won. He thought he'd broken me, that I'd just roll over and do whatever it took to keep them happy. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice steady. "I've been looking at some options, and I think I found something that could work. There's an opening for a janitor at your company. I think I'll apply for it." Matt froze, his fork mid-air. The smug smile faded as confusion crossed his features. "Wait, what?" I nodded, my face a mask of calm. "Yeah, it seems like a good fit. Something part-time, something to keep me busy." "Dad, are you serious?" he asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. I smiled, just a little. "I'm serious. I think it'll be good for me. And it sounds like something you won't mind. It's just cleaning, right? You've always told me to be humble, to work hard, no matter what the job is. So, why not?" Matt stared at me, his thoughts clearly racing. I didn't expect you to actually agree to that. I thought you'd fight me on it." I shrugged. "You asked me to get a job. I'm getting one. What's the problem?" He cleared his throat, but his tone was more defensive now. I thought you'd find something, better than a janitor position." "I'm not concerned about the job itself," I said, my voice level. "I just want to stay active. If that's what it takes, then fine." Rachel chose that moment to walk back into the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she entered. She glanced between us, then gave me a tight smile. "Well, that's good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about it, John." I gave her a small nod, suppressing the anger that surged at the back of my throat. She wasn't happy to see me agree so easily. She wanted me to resist, to fight against it, but I wasn't about to give her or Matt that satisfaction. I was playing a longer game. "Well, I'll leave you two to it," Rachel said, her voice overly cheerful, though the smile never quite reached her eyes. "Good luck with the job search, John. We'll figure out the rest later, okay?" I nodded again, the smile still forced on my face. "Thanks. I'll make sure to let you know how it goes." As she left the room, Matt sat back in his chair, clearly still processing my decision. I knew he expected me to be angry, to lash out, but instead, he got the calm version of me, The version that had been worn down, yes, but also the one who knew how to bide his time. "All right," Matt said, his voice a little more subdued. "If you think it's what you want, I didn't want you to fall into some trap, you know?" I gave him a tight smile. "I'm fine, Matt. I'll make sure to make myself useful." Matt didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just picked up his phone and started scrolling, the conversation clearly over for him. I could tell he thought he had won, that he had gotten me to agree to what he wanted, but he had no idea how much he had underestimated me. He thought I was desperate. He thought I was weak, but I wasn't. I was far from it. While Matt and Rachel were busy patting themselves on the back, assuming victory, I was quietly planning my next step. They thought they could control me, treat me like I was a problem to be fixed, but soon they would realize just how wrong they were. I would play along for now, but when the time came, they'd see. I'd make sure of it. The air felt colder than usual as I stepped out of the house, my old jacket feeling too thin against the chill of the morning. Today was the day. Today, I would begin my new job at Matt's company, not in a corner office or behind a desk, but cleaning up the mess that had been made of my life. I arrived early, well before the office buzzed with activity, parking my car in the employee lot far from the front entrance. My heart thudded in my chest, but I kept my face blank, my movements purposeful. I wasn't here to play games. I was here for one reason, to make them see. I walked into the building through the back entrance, nodding at the security guard, who didn't seem to give me a second glance. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I was capable of, and I was content with that. For now. The janitor's closet was at the end of a narrow hallway, tucked away from the more important offices. As I grabbed my uniform, blue coveralls, a faded cap, something inside me hardened. This wasn't what I'd imagined for myself when I was younger, but it wasn't about me anymore. It was about Matt. It was about showing him just how much he underestimated me. I slipped the uniform on, noticing how stiff the fabric was against my skin. It was the uniform of a servant, a man who'd been reduced to nothing but a cog in the wheel. And that's exactly what they expected of me. Someone to be ignored, someone who didn't matter. But I would play my part for now. I would be their humble janitor. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, and I turned to see Matt striding toward me, a smug grin already forming on his face. He stopped in front of me, looking me up and down with a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. "There you are," he said, his voice full of false cheer. "This is where you'll be working. I hope the work isn't too hard for you, Dad." His words stung, but I didn't show it. I just nodded, my expression blank. "I'm happy to help." Matt chuckled, his tone patronizing. "You'll be sweeping floors, cleaning bathrooms, making sure everything's spotless. No fancy office for you, huh?" I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Matt, for all his arrogance, still didn't realize what he'd just set in motion. He was so sure of his victory, so convinced that he'd made me fall in line. "You'll meet the rest of the cleaning staff soon," Matt continued, still talking down to me like I was his employee, not his father. "I'm sure you'll fit in well." I watched as he walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. The air was thick with the tension I could feel, but not yet touch. I was here. I was where he wanted me. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I spent the next few hours cleaning, not because I had to, but because it was a reminder of how far Matt and Rachel were willing to go to strip me of my dignity. Every task I completed, every corner I swept, felt like a small act of defiance. They thought they were humiliating me, but I knew something they didn't. I knew who I was, and they didn't. By midday, the office was buzzing with activity. Employees in sharp suits and high heels rushed past me without a second glance, completely oblivious to the fact that I wasn't just the janitor. I was the man who had built this place, who had quietly supported it for years. As I mopped the floors in the break room, I overheard a conversation between two employees, their voices casual, unaware that I was listening. "Did you hear about the new guy, the janitor? I heard he's Matt's dad." Can you imagine? I kept my head down, pretending not to hear them, but inside, I smiled to myself. They had no idea. None of them knew who I was or what I had done, and that was exactly the way I needed it for now. I would bide my time. I would let them laugh, let them feel superior. Soon, very soon, they would regret it. And when they did, they would realize just how wrong they were to think they could push me aside. For now, I cleaned. And with every sweep of the mop, I reminded myself of the power I still held. It was my third day working as a janitor at Matt's company, and the novelty had worn off faster than I had expected. Every corner I swept, every floor I mopped, felt like a calculated move, part of my strategy to keep my enemy close, to let them think they had won. The hum of the corporate office around me felt foreign, even though I had been in and out of similar buildings countless times over the years. This time, though, it was different. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I wasn't the man in a suit shaking hands and discussing quarterly reports. I was the guy cleaning up after their mess, invisible to everyone who mattered, except one person. As I was finishing up in the break room, I noticed Leonard, the CEO of the company, walking toward me with a curious look on his face. I had seen him around before, but he had no reason to notice me. He was used to the polished executive type of employees, not someone like me, in a janitor's uniform, but that's exactly why I was here. "Excuse me," Leonard said as he approached. "You're the new janitor, right?" I nodded, trying my best to remain humble, keeping my gaze low as I mopped the floor in measured, rhythmic strokes. "Do you mind if I ask why you're here?" Leonard continued, his voice now laced with an odd mix of curiosity and suspicion. I didn't look up from my work, but I could feel his eyes boring into me. "Just here to do my job." Leonard was quiet for a beat before speaking again, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I've noticed you around the last couple of days, but I haven't seen you anywhere else. Not in meetings, not in any of the upper floors, not with Matt or anyone else important here." I couldn't help but let a small, controlled smile tug at the corner of my mouth. This was it. This was the moment when everything would begin to unravel. "I'm just here to do my job, like I said," I repeated, my voice calm. Leonard frowned, looking at me for a long moment before crossing his arms. "That's strange," he said slowly. "I know everyone who works here, and you don't look like someone who would just take a janitor's job without a reason. You're too, well, put together for that. Something doesn't add up." A few more beats of silence passed, and I could sense that he was trying to piece it all together in his mind. Finally, I looked up from my work, meeting his gaze. "Maybe it's not what you think. Maybe the person you think you know isn't who you think he is." Leonard's brow furrowed as he took a step closer, his curiosity deepening. "What are you talking about? What's your connection to Matt?" I leaned against the mop, standing up straighter now, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I'm Matt's father." Leonard's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, you?" "Yeah," I said calmly. "I'm John, the same John who's been quietly running this company behind the scenes for years. Only no one knew, least of all Matt." There was a long silence between us as Leonard processed what I had just said. His gaze flickered toward Matt's office, then back at me. "No way. You've been involved with this company?" "From the very beginning," I replied. But I kept it quiet. I didn't want anyone to know. I wasn't interested in the recognition, just in making sure things ran smoothly. Leonard's expression shifted from disbelief to something like awe. "Wait, you're telling me you've been an investor, a business partner, and you've been working as a janitor?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Yep, just doing my part like everyone else." Leonard let out a slow breath, still processing the bombshell I had just dropped. I don't even know what to say. Matt had no idea." "Nope," I said, allowing myself a small, bitter chuckle. "He's always been too busy trying to impress people to notice what's right in front of him. That's why he's been treating me like this. He thinks I'm just a burden, a problem to be solved." Leonard shook his head, disbelief still evident in his face. This changes everything. I don't know how Matt didn't see it, but you're a major part of this company." I could see the wheels turning in his head as he processed the new reality. It was obvious that Matt's world was about to collapse. All his power, all his arrogance, it was all built on lies and misunderstandings. But that was about to change. Then Leonard did something that surprised me. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Matt needs to hear this," he said firmly, looking at me with a mix of respect and disappointment. "And it needs to come from me." I stood there silently, letting him do his thing. In just a few minutes, Leonard came back, his face pale. "I've spoken to Matt. He's not happy, John. He's in complete shock." "I'm sure he is," I said, my voice steady. "But that's the reality he needs to face. And he's going to have to face the consequences of his actions." Leonard nodded slowly, looking back at the door to Matt's office. "I can't believe he's been treating you like this. I'm going to handle it. Matt needs to understand the gravity of this. And the way he's been treating you, That's going to cost him. And just like that, Leonard made the call that would change everything. The next thing I knew, I was watching Matt's world shatter. As Leonard hung up the phone, his eyes fixed on me, the gravity of the situation settling between us. "Matt's fired," Leonard said quietly, "for his behavior, for how he's treated you. It's unacceptable. I can't have someone like that representing this company, especially not someone who's so careless with family." I stood there, my heart racing. This was it. Matt had finally crossed the line, and now he was about to find out what it felt like to be on the other side. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Thank you, Leonard. I appreciate you taking care of this." Leonard shook his head, still in disbelief. "This is going to turn his world upside down, John. But it's what he deserves." And just like that, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd hidden, had come to light. The meeting was scheduled for noon, but I had arrived early, letting the silence of the office wash over me. Leonard, his expression solemn and professional, had asked me to wait in his office while Matt and Rachel were on their way. The tension in the air felt like static, crackling with anticipation. Matt was about to learn the lesson of a lifetime. The door opened with a soft click, and Matt walked in first, looking pale, his jaw clenched tight. Rachel followed, her posture stiff and defensive, eyes flicking to me as she hesitated in the doorway. There was no warmth in their glances, just suspicion, maybe even fear. They had no idea what was coming. I had to admit, seeing the look of shock in Matt's eyes was almost satisfying. It was exactly what I wanted. But I kept my face neutral, my posture calm. I wasn't here to gloat. This wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching a lesson. Leonard stood up from behind his desk as they took their seats, his gaze still directed at me. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Matt, Rachel," Leonard said, his voice carrying authority. "We need to have a conversation about your behavior. Specifically, Matt's behavior." I could see Matt bristle at the mention of his name, but he said nothing, waiting for the storm he'd caused to break over him. Rachel, on the other hand, shifted uncomfortably, but stayed silent. I knew this wasn't going to be easy for them, but I was about to make it even harder. Leonard's gaze turned toward me. "John," he said, using my first name for the first time since our conversation about the company. "I need to hear it from you. I'm struggling to wrap my head around how Matt could treat you this way." I met his eyes and nodded slowly, the weight of my next words carrying an undeniable gravity. Matt didn't know who I was. He never asked. He never cared to look past the surface. My voice was steady, but it was clear there was a level of betrayal beneath it. "But I'm not just anyone. I've been part of this company for years, as an investor, as a business partner. I've been making decisions from behind the scenes while Matt's been running around, assuming he could run the show." Matt shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze dropping briefly to the floor. He clearly wasn't used to being put in a position like this. I could practically feel his pulse racing as he realized the depth of his mistake. He thought I was just some old man playing at being relevant, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. "Wait," Matt said, finally finding his voice, though it was shaky. "You're telling me, all this time, you've been involved in the company, you're an investor, a business partner, I'm the reason this company is where it is," I interrupted, my tone firm. "While you've been focused on building your career, I've been building this company. You never thought to ask about the financials, the real decisions that were being made. You've been too busy with your ego." Rachel spoke up, her voice more measured but clearly uneasy. But why didn't you say anything? Why hide it from us?" I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair, the frustration from years of silence rising to the surface. Because I didn't need recognition. I didn't need anyone to pat me on the back. I didn't do it for that. But now, Matt's behavior, his disrespect? No, that's not something I'm going to sit back and take. Leonard's eyes narrowed, his disappointment now clear. "Matt," he said, his voice sharp, "you've treated your father with nothing but contempt. And now it's cost you everything. This isn't just about family, this is about how you've chosen to conduct yourself in this company. I'm sorry to say this, but your actions have consequences." The weight of Leonard's words sank in, and I could see Matt's face blanch as the realization hit him. Leonard wasn't just scolding him, he was firing him. "Matt, I'm afraid your behavior, your treatment of John, has made it impossible for you to remain with the company," Leonard continued. "Effective immediately, you're terminated." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel Rachel's sharp intake of breath beside me. Matt sat frozen, his face a mixture of disbelief, anger, and now fear. His world was crumbling in real time. I could practically hear his mind scrambling for an escape, some way to fix the mess he had made. But there was no fixing this. "Leonard, you can't be serious," Matt said, his voice rising in desperation. This is my life. I've worked so hard for this. You can't just—" "I can and I will," Leonard said coldly. "I'm sorry, Matt, but I can't keep someone in a position of power who disrespects their family like this. Not when it goes against everything this company stands for." Matt's face twisted in anger, his fists clenched at his sides. "You're making a huge mistake," he spat. But his words didn't carry the same conviction they had earlier. The power had shifted. He knew it. I stood up from my chair slowly, watching as Matt's world crumbled. I wasn't sure if he realized yet just how badly he'd misjudged me, but I hoped he would eventually. In his arrogance, he thought he was in control, that he had me figured out. But he had no idea who I really was. "Goodbye, Matt," I said, my voice calm. "I hope this teaches you something. Maybe now you'll understand what it means to truly respect someone, to appreciate what's been given to you, but you won't get that chance with me anymore." Leonard stood as well, nodding at me in agreement. "But John, I can't tell you how sorry I am that you had to go through this. No one deserves to be treated like that. I'll make sure this gets taken care of." And as Matt and Rachel sat there, speechless and stunned, I knew one thing for sure. The lesson had been learned. The days following the explosion of Matt's world were chaotic. I watched from the periphery as he and Rachel tried to piece together their shattered lives. There were no apologies, no moments of reflection, just panic, desperation, and eventually, blame. Matt and Rachel had lost everything: their job, their reputation, their control. It was almost too easy. Matt, who had once treated me like an inconvenience, had now become the inconvenience. The tables had turned, and with it, my freedom. Leonard, ever the professional, handled the fallout swiftly. Matt's termination was announced publicly. Rachel was quietly placed under investigation for embezzlement, a final, fitting act for someone who had clearly been living in the shadows of their own greed. I knew, however, that this wasn't about punishing them. This was about making them understand the weight of their arrogance. But I had nothing left to prove. The victory was mine, not because of the humiliation I had orchestrated, but because I had reclaimed something far more important: my dignity. It was a week after the storm had passed when Leonard called me into his office. The weight of the last few days hung in the air, but now there was a different feeling, a quiet resolution. As I stepped into Leonard's office, I could see that he was still processing the chaos. He sat behind his desk, a rare moment of solemnity crossing his face. "John," Leonard began, his voice level but his eyes sincere, "I can't tell you how sorry I am for what happened. You didn't deserve to be treated like that by your own son, but I think you know that already." I nodded. "It was a long time coming," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "But I never wanted things to go this way. I thought I was doing what was best for him. For the family." Leonard leaned back in his chair, his hands folded across his chest. "I can't begin to understand how you felt, hiding all this time. It must have been exhausting." "Exhausting, yes," I replied, my gaze falling to the floor for a moment. "But necessary. If I had told them everything, it wouldn't have mattered, not to Matt. He needed to come to this conclusion himself. It was the only way." "I respect that," Leonard said, his tone a little warmer now. "And for what it's worth, I'm glad you kept your distance. Matt, he's lost everything, John. He's facing the consequences of his own arrogance, and it's not just about the company anymore. It's about him." I looked at Leonard for a long moment, considering his words. "Do you think he'll learn from this?" Leonard hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I hope so, but it's going to take time. He's been so wrapped up in himself for so long that it'll take a real shock to his system to make him see what's been right in front of him, the respect he's lost, the damage he's caused. But he'll get there, eventually." I sighed, standing up and looking out the window behind Leonard's desk. The view from here was different than my old office at the firm. Not better, not worse, just different. And somehow, that seemed fitting. "I've been thinking about my future," I said slowly, turning back to face Leonard. "I've been given a chance to walk away from all this. The family drama, the false expectations. I don't need the retirement I once imagined. What I need now is peace. Leonard raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You're not considering coming back to work, are you?" I smiled, but it wasn't with malice. "Number? I'm done with that. I've had my time. I helped build this company, and I'm proud of what it's become. But I don't need to be here to keep it running. The truth is, I've been living for everyone else. And now, I think it's time I live for myself." Leonard looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded, as if coming to a quiet decision of his own. "I understand, John, but, if you ever change your mind, the door is always open. You've done too much for this company to just walk away from it all." "I know," I said with a chuckle, "and I'm grateful for the offer. But for now, I'm choosing something else, something quieter." As I stood to leave, Leonard's voice stopped me. "One last thing, John. I know the company's offer to you is on the table, but I have to ask, are you sure you don't want to reconsider? Retirement's waiting for you. You've earned it." I smiled, but this time it was filled with peace. "I don't need a retirement package, Leonard. I've already retired. I'm living my life now. No more obligations, no more false expectations, just me, for the first time in a long while." And as I walked out of Leonard's office, I realized something important. This was the beginning of my real retirement. Not the one dictated by anyone else, but the one I had chosen for myself. I walked away from the chaos I'd orchestrated, free from the burden of living up to anyone's expectations, free from being seen as a financial asset or a tool to be used. The future was mine now, and for the first time in years, I was truly in control. I didn't need to look back. My life had changed, and the peace I felt walking away was more satisfying than any retirement check ever could be. I thought about Matt and Rachel one last time as I left the building behind me. They had a long road ahead of them, one they would have to walk without me. But that was no longer my problem. I had reclaimed my dignity, and that was more than enough. I climbed into my car and drove away, knowing that the rest of my life was going to be lived on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely free.